Hey, and welcome to this week's edition of the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Sechler Law Firm, where great families make great estate plans. My name is Tim Sechler. I am your host here each and every week on the Life and Legacy Show. So whether you're listening to this on the radio in Pittsburgh or whether you're listening to this online on your phone, this show is designed to get you the information you need to know in order to make great estate planning decisions for yourself, your family, your money. My law firm, the theory goes that educated decisions are typically better decisions. We want people to make well-informed decisions. I think in the estate planning space in particular, it's complicated stuff and people do not make great decisions all the time. And I think it's because they didn't know their options. And so we've gone about creating an entire series of information content like this radio show, like the workshops that we host, like our videos that we have on our website, giving you the information you need in order to make great decisions. But keep in mind, you need to make that in conjunction with working with a lawyer. So the information we put out on this radio show and elsewhere is for your information and your education. You should not make legal decisions based on what you hear on this or anybody else's radio show. You need to chat with somebody who knows what they're talking about to do this stuff correctly. We're available anytime at sechlerlawfirm.com, Sechler lawfirm.com. That's pretty tricky to spell. My first name is not tricky to spell, so you could go to estateplantim.com and that will get you there too. So in our talks on this show and a lot of the content that we do, our seminars, our workshops, what I like to talk an awful lot about is planning for retirees or soon to be retirees on how to protect their stuff, their family from the issues that demographic faces, long-term care costs, eventual probate expenses, taxes. And most of my career, most of my life has been dedicated to working through those issues. And if you're new to the show, my law firm exists because I watched my own grandfather go through all of his money battling Alzheimer's disease. And I really just don't think it should be that way, right? And so we've got tons of episodes. If you look at our podcast on iTunes or Spotify, there's hundreds of episodes on this topic at this point. And we've become pretty well founded in our belief system at the firm on how to properly plan for these issues. Today's show and some of the more recent stuff that we've been working on is for a different demographic. I recently redid my own personal estate plan. In the last couple of months, I've been sort of thinking through what I wanted it to do. Our children are getting a little older. Our financial situation changes as we've saved through our careers, et cetera. And so it's just a good time for my wife and I to check in on our estate plan and does it do what I want it to do. And we learn from our experiences, right? We learn from the situations we find ourselves in, how to respond next time. I mean, that's one of the great things about life is we get to learn from mistakes and we get to learn from challenges. And I've been through some challenges with some families that are similarly situated to mine when life throws a curveball, right? In my world, we don't always get to deal with the happiest of times. We deal with a lot with folks going through injuries and disabilities and deaths and untimely and unexpected situations like that. And I have become increasingly now opinionated on the philosophy on how I think we need to plan for younger families. So we have an entire now seminar and webinar series for younger families. It's called the 5 Secrets to Protect Your Family. And the thought process is the estate planning things you need to know to protect your kids from the cradle to college, right? Because as we're planning, just like the folks in the sort of senior retiree space have their own concerns, well, parents of little kids have their concerns too. I happen to be a parent of little kids, so as I'm here doing the radio show, I've got a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, and an 8-year-old, boy, girl, right? And they are my pride and joy. They are my primary responsibility in life, right? And so if you think through what is the primary purpose of being a parent, like what's my primary job? If I'm a parent, what's my primary job? And I think if I had to put it in one sentence, I think my primary job is to raise good humans, right? I've got these little humans. There's these little humans that live in my home. I love them. I've had, them there for over a decade. They're beautiful little people. They've got their quirks, they got their humor, they've got, we love them to death. They drive us crazy. We drive them crazy. It's parenthood, right? So I've got these little humans under my control, my care and control. And my primary job is to take the little humans and raise them into bigger humans that can be happy, self-sufficient people out in the world, right? They will find careers that they're passionate about. They will find love that they're passionate about. They'll eventually maybe have their own kids. They'll have their own beautiful life. And my job is to prepare them for that life, right? That's what we do as parents. And being an estate planner, I have to plan for the unknown. And I think that we parents of little kids have to reconcile, have to deal with the issue that my primary duty of raising good humans could potentially outlive me, right? Um, and we need to be able to plan for that. So what happens if or even worse, my wife and I are killed by a drunk driver? What happens? Now, this is statistically unlikely, right? It's statistically probably not going to happen. Um, but statistically speaking, my house is also not going to burn to the ground, statistically speaking. But I still have homeowners insurance in case that it would, because if it did, it would be devastating. It would be a financially devastating situation if our house burnt down. Well, it would also be a devastating parental situation if my wife and I both passed away. Like, what's the impact on my kids? And unfortunately, most young parents of young kids don't actually plan on this. I mean, maybe you have a will. What's the primary purpose of a will? The primary purpose of a will is to to name who gets the stuff when you pass away. But young families don't even have a lot of stuff, right? So where's the money? Well, hopefully, if we're smart, go out and buy some life insurance. Got to have life insurance if you got little kids, right? Or the retirement account at work. Well, okay. The will governs what I own in my own name, which for most young families is not a ton of money. Um, the will can be used to do some planning, right? But the primary purpose of a will is to answer the question, who gets my stuff? Now, we can also name the executor. That's the person who gets to make some decisions. We also get to name guardians of our kids, right? So guardians of our kids, who a guardian is a person who's essentially supposed to like step into my shoes if I'm gone. Okay, well, that's all well and good. But here's the problem with guardianship. Guardianship ends at age 18, right? Well, I've met very few 18-year-olds who are well-polished adult humans, right? So if my job is to raise great adult humans, 18 may legally be the age of adulthood, but for a practical standpoint, I don't think we're done growing yet, right? And so, but guardianship ends at age 18. Now, if you leave money to kids, like people all the time will advise families, all you need is a simple will. Really, a simple will, right? Well, simple will would say everything to my spouse, if you're married, everything to your spouse, then to your kids. And the law would then provide that if a minor's is going to inherit money, they get their money in a thing called a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account. All right. Now, that would put someone else in control, maybe a grandparent, an uncle, or aunt, in control of the money until the kid turns 21. So someone else has a vote on how the money's being run until they're 18, until they're 21. So there's a guardian making the legal decisions for where the person lives, goes to school, and all the rest. Someone else could be in charge of the money until age 21. But after 21, the kid's on their own. So I want to ask you a question. Had you been entitled to an inheritance on your 21st birthday, right? Let's say you went through a terrible situation when you were younger, you lost your parents, but your parents had a term life insurance policy for $1 million, right? Not an expensive policy to buy if people are in good health. So you got this $1 million coverage, and I'm 21 and I'm 20, and my aunt is in charge of the $1 million right now. But in 6 months, I turned 21 and I'm in control of the $1 million in 6 months. What type of decision making is going on at this point? What kind of motivation is there to form a career or do well in college or trade school? What Or would you have turned out being the same person had you known you had $1 million payday on your 21st birthday? I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have been a good human. I like to consider myself a good human at this point in time, but I wouldn't have been a good human at 21 if I knew at age 17 I was a millionaire on my 21st birthday, right? It would have been different. I would have made some different decisions. And they wouldn't have been good decisions, right? So this is the thing that we got to plan for. So now, well, okay, so how do we plan for that? Well, the will, I think we would probably be moving out of the territory of what somebody would call a simple will, but the will could create trusts, right? And the trust could have certain terms and conditions on what's to happen with the money. Now, here's an experience though that I've had. Wills have to go through this system called probate, right? Probate is the court administration process for administering a will. So it doesn't happen like it happens in the movies, right? So in the movies, somebody passes away, and like a week later, there's a dramatic scene where the reading of the will takes place, and it's in some mahogany-lined lawyer's office with some gray-haired, angry-looking lawyer sitting behind a big desk, and the family's all sitting around with bated breath, waiting to find out what their inheritance is, right? That doesn't happen. That's not how it goes, right? Um, what happens is the executor of the will needs to take it to the courthouse, get sworn in, because the executor of the will can't do anything until the judge says that they can, right? So now we're in this court process. The will is then basically mailed to the beneficiaries, and we have to provide certain accountings to the beneficiaries on what they're allowed to have. But it takes us weeks, if not months, to find out what dad or mom actually owned. And then you got to go through this long process. So now let's think about this as a situation with little kids, right? If my wife and I would be killed by a drunk driver, and we're lucky enough to score a babysitter on a Friday night, right? We go out, we get killed by the drunk driver. The cops show up at the house. The babysitter is worried because we're 2 hours past due. Cops show up with the bad news. There's a social worker in tow, and they're trying to figure out what to do with these kids tonight. The babysitter, is probably not the right person who's emotionally equipped to handle this situation. So we got to find some family members. But where do the kids sleep that night? Where do they sleep for the next week? Have we even given some consideration to that? Because it's probably going to take a week or two to figure out if mom and dad even had a will. And we don't know where that thing is, right? So where do the kids go? There's a document in a well-drafted estate plan in Pennsylvania. You can do a document called a standby guardianship, which would be the paper that could be pulled out to show that state trooper and that social worker that mom and dad wanted these kids to stay with the neighbor, or to stay with grandma, or to stay with this uncle, not that uncle. That's called a standby guardianship, but that's not part of a simple will, and families don't do this, even though it's not a complicated thing to do. You just need to know how. But major importance, like we're talking about the saddest experience ever, right? We're talking about kids losing their parents. We're talking about like the worst thing that's ever going to happen in their life. And we have the ability to manage this situation a little bit. Statistically, yeah, unlikely. The impact that it would have on my kids becoming good humans over time is huge, though. And we need to take this a little bit more seriously. Now, here's the other thing. Wills have to go through this probate court, which means we get a judge. Now, here's the thing about the way I've seen some judges behave in this world is judges sometimes have opinions. Sometimes they're good opinions, sometimes they're not good opinions. Sometimes they might be perfectly reasonable opinions that I disagree with. I recently had a case, I won't name the county, but I had a case where a minor was entitled to an inheritance. We had to go through the probate system. And the will said, we didn't write the will, but there was nothing wrong with the will. The will said that these grandkids should receive their inheritance in what's called a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account, which would leave their parents, because it was grandma that passed away, leaving money to the grandkids. It would leave the parents of those kids in control of the money until their 21st birthday. Okay, what's wrong with this, right? And it was not a lot of money. These kids were entitled to like 5 or 10 grand. It was not a lot of money. And the judge would not let us fund the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account. Yeah, whenever you are in probate with little kids, you got to get permission to do pretty much anything. So Will said Transfers to Minors Act, and we went and opened the accounts, went to the judge and said, Your Honor, we'd like to fund these accounts. And the judge said, no, we're not going to do that. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And the judge said, we're going to hold the money in court sequestered accounts. Now, a court sequestered account means that the money is in the account And the judge has the pen to the checkbook, essentially. And I said, Your Honor, the will says Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. Presumably, grandma was counseled on her options. Um, the legislature, who writes the laws in this state, saw fit to pass a law for exactly this situation. That's why it's called a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account. They passed the law for exactly this situation. So, Your Honor, why are we not listening to what grandma wanted? And why are we not listening to what to what the law actually is? And the judge said, well, last year I had an uncle in charge of a nephew's Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account, and he was a bad guy and he stole the money. So I'm just going to essentially assume all parents are bad people and they're going to just steal the money. So now I'm in charge of the money, which begs the question, what happens when, the judge retires? And it begs the question, it begs a lot of questions, but I can tell you what is happening is the money hasn't been touched. It's sitting in some account, which is not what grandma wanted. Grandma wanted the money to be used for the benefit of the grandkids. And I got like kind of upset about this. And then, the judge, we were politely told that if we didn't like his opinion, we could appeal. Um, but who's going to appeal over a couple $1,000, right? So anyway, an estate planning failure in my mind. Had grandma known that that's what was going to happen in the probate system, she wouldn't have done it. There's no way she would have done it. Not for 5 or 10 grand. No, give it to the parents, and the parents will say, "Hey, grandma loves you. Here's some money or whatever." But so anyway, the day that happened, I decided that my family was no longer going to be subject to that system. I'm not using a will for my family because I don't care about the judge's opinion. It's my opinion that counts. These are my children. I don't want the government dictating how my children are going to be raised or when they have access to money. None of their business, in my opinion. And so I decided with my family, no, we're not doing that. So we created a trust. Now, this is the stuff that we were talking about. If when I'm chatting with you about, maybe you're listening to this and you think that you need to get this topic to like your kids so that they can plan, or if you have little kids and you're listening to this, we have a webinar that we do. It's called The 5 Secrets to Protect Your Family. You can register for the webinar for free at sechlerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com. Go to the page, go to the workshops tab, and you're going to find that you can register for this webinar. It's free. It takes about an hour. We do it over your lunch hour because I want you to have the education. I don't want you to have to take a day off of work to go meet with somebody to talk about this stuff. So we're doing the webinar, and it's been pretty well received. And one of the things that we teach you during this webinar is how you can use a trust in order to protect your kids a little better. So let's just talk about what a trust is. So a revocable living trust is a document you sign. Right now, there's 3 people involved. There's the person who creates the trust. That person, we're going to call them the grantor. Right? They create this trust. This trust is its own legal entity, and then they transfer some stuff to the trust. So, like, you could deed your house to the trust. You could retitle your bank accounts, and now the trust owns the stuff. Right? The person in control of the trust is called the trustee. That's the person who makes the decisions. And then the people who are allowed to access the stuff in the trust, well, those people are called beneficiaries. Now, with the most popular type of trust, which is called a revocable living trust, this is the estate plan I've created for my family, is you create your trust. You and your spouse create a joint trust, perhaps. You put some stuff in the trust. You guys would be your own trustee. You're still in control of the money. And as long as you're alive and well, you're the beneficiary of the trust. But if you do pass away, now the assets we transfer title to this trust, those assets are no longer subject to the provisions of your will because you didn't own them in your own name, right? They're entitled to the trust. In the trust document says, upon Tim's death or upon your death, give the stuff to the kids in equal shares. Right? So the trust does what the will would have done, except now we don't need what? We don't need the courthouse. We don't need the probate system. We don't need the judge's opinion. This is going to be handled as more of a family private matter. There's going to be, a lawyer meeting or a couple of lawyer meetings around a conference room, but the conference room is better than the courtroom when it comes to this stuff. And so we can handle it as more of a private matter. And then what that trust does is rather than giving the money to the kids at age 18 or 21 just to turn them into little jerks, the money is held in separate trust until they hit whatever age you tell us. More popular ages are 25 or 30 these days. I've had a lot of clients that have even gone to 35. Uncle John is in control of the money until age 30. Okay. Now, that's what's called an underage trust, right? We're protecting the kid from their own poor decision making as a youngster until they reach age 25, 30, whatever your number is, right? Then what a lot of estate plans do is that trust then terminates and the kid gets the money at that age. That's not really how I like to do it, right? What I want to do is then protect your kids from their next potential issue. What's their next potential issue? Well, get the money at age 25. What is the biggest financial risk that families go through that people go through from age 25 to 35? Divorce. The biggest financial issue people are going to have between age 25 and age 35 is divorce. And so I got a little girl. If I pass away young, she gets the money at age 25. She marries Mr. Wrong. If you're a parent of a girl, you know that nobody's ever going to be good enough for your little girl, right? That's how I feel about my girl. And so she's entitled to this inheritance. She gets, let's just say there's a whole bunch of life insurance. She gets $1 million on her 25th birthday. Okay. Well, what if she's married to Mr. Wrong? Or what if she's dating Mr. Wrong and Mr. Wrong finds out that she just got $1 million, right? He gets down on one knee. He proposes. They actually get married. They actually do this for a while, right? 5 years, 7 years. They commingle funds. They buy a house together. She pays off his student loans because they don't like the interest rate. And then they go through a divorce. Where's my money? Who gets the money now? Because I didn't get the money for his student loans. I got the money for my little girl, right? And so what I like to do with the estate plan is when my daughter turns 25, that trust doesn't end. She just gets control of the trust. She can become a trustee on the trust, right? So control shifts at that age, but we're not distributing the money because now I can have the inheritance in a situation where it doesn't become a marital asset and it would be protected from like general creditors. Red car hits blue car, lawsuits, slip fall stuff. My daughter never owned the money. I own the money. I passed away young. I put it in a trust. That trust was the money was held in trust for her until she was 25. Once she turned 25, she got control of the trust, but it's still in the trust. She never owned the money. And now I've protected my little girl from her biggest financial risk in her 20s and 30s is the financial ramifications of a poor marital decision, which with most marriages ending in divorce these days is not a bad idea. Okay. Now, this is real planning. This is more than a simple will, right? What I'm talking about is actual planning put in place to help you do your job as a parent, raise good humans, right? What most people just do beneficiary designations on a life insurance policy. It says all to my spouse and then to the kids. Kids get the money on their 21st birthday rather than having that money funnel through a trust. Kids get their money on their 21st birthday and it turn into jerks, right? Red sports car and beer. And it just doesn't work. And yeah, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. This is the difference between having a document and having a plan, right? Because we as parents, my job doesn't end at 18. It doesn't end at 21. It's not like at age 21, I should go into my kitchen where my 21-year-old knucklehead is sitting and put a bag of money on the table and say, here you go. I'm done. Here's your money, right? I'm sure you're a good human by now. I'm sure you won't make mistakes with this $1 million bag of money. I'm sure everything's going to be fine, right? That's not what we would do. That's not how parenting works. But unfortunately, if you fail to plan and you die young, that's essentially your plan, is that a bag of money is going to land on the kitchen table on your kid's 21st birthday. And how's this going to go, right? And so I've become a lot more passionate about helping younger families, as a parent myself, accomplish their own objectives, which usually is some variation of raising good humans, right? I want to help you accomplish your objective of raising good humans, even if life throws you a curveball, an untimely death, a disability, some illness, something that could get in your way of your plans. And this is all possible, but we got to talk about it, which is why, you got to start with education. Educated decisions are better decisions. And that's why we offer a free webinar to teach you how to do this. It's called The 5 Secrets to Protect Your Family. You can find it at sechlerlawfirm.com. Go to sechlerlawfirm.com. You got to click on the workshops tab. And this workshop is online. It's a webinar, but it's under the workshops tab. And we'll teach you a lot of the things you need to know about how these trusts work and how you can set up your family. So I hope you found this week's episode informational. I hope you found it motivating. I hope you didn't find it too downtrodden because nobody really likes to talk about passing away young, but we got to wrestle with this, guys. Um, Now, remember, don't make any legal decisions based on what you heard on this or any other radio show. This is for your information, not for advice, right? If you'd like some legal advice, we'd be more than happy to help you. Go to SechlerLawFirm.com, Secler lawfirm.com. And if you think about this stuff like I think about this stuff, we're going to get you set up correctly. So love to work with you. Love to meet you. Thanks for listening to the radio show today. I hope you have a great day.